Greetings, everybody. Welcome to my Icon Corner. I am Young Penitent, and today I am going to be interviewing Justine Alter. I was contacted by New Martyr Press, and they explained to me that they have a new book out and that they had a woman with an interesting story, and they hooked me up with this interview. And so I'm about to bring her to the stage, but before we do that, I'd like to remind everybody to please hit the subscribe button. It doesn't take much effort. You just reach down and press the thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel because that's just what people do. And with that, I will add Justine to the stage. Hello, Justine. Welcome.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, glory to God. How are you?
I'm good. I'm getting over a little bit of a sickness here. Oh, by the way, Christ is risen.
In truth, he is risen.
Yeah, we are still in Pascha. It's still Pascha, technically. Bright Week. We are recording this Bright Week 2024. So the way I would like to start this interview is, so I explained that I was contacted by New Martyr Press, and you are showing here your avatar on it. It shows this picture from the book you have written. So I'm going to go to the New Martyr Press website just to show people what it looks like. Here we are. So this is the New Martyr Press website, and this is a new press, and I've been kind of seeing this around, and this is a new so I've kind of been seeing this around. They have a book of Akathis here, and they have your book. Now can you tell me how did you get hooked up with the New Martyr Press? Was this before your was this before you started writing the book or after? How did that work out?
No, what happened was I finished writing this book when I was about 26. I'm 28 now. And then after that, I was trying to kind of figure things out and what I should be doing with this book. And I got the blessing to have it published. And I was figuring out my options, and this just kind of seemed like the best fit and the best situation for me.
Okay, so you had finished the book. You had finished the book, and then you contacted the press to see if they would publish it for you. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, we talked about it, and they were really interested in doing that. So, thank God.
Okay, and so I'll just show people again on the website. So if they go to the website, they click, let's see, click on the book, and then it'll send you over to, they have an interview that you have done that is written, not recorded, and then they have this first printing that they can go to, and it sends you to Etsy, which is interesting. The book looks beautiful. I mean, it looks just kind of like it looks like a piece of artwork almost. It's just really well done. It appears. Here's the cover. I actually ordered the book. I was very intrigued. The story sounds very interesting. Can you explain to me what's going on with the cover? It's got this woman and a couple faces looking up at the woman.
Yeah, I'm actually a fine artist. So I made this painting maybe when I was 22, 23. Occultists, they really told me that if I converted to Orthodoxy, that I wouldn't be able to manage having a regular life without magic.
Hello, hold on. We're experiencing some. Can you hear me? There's a lot of white noise going on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I hear a lot of static and I can't really. It's not coming in clear. Okay. Let's see. Where were we? And
The
this is
artwork.
right, the artwork. So yeah, you're explaining this
Okay.
cover.
Yeah, so this painting is actually like about 6 feet tall. I had people model for this, but the concept of the painting, I guess, was me working through my feelings surrounding being told that if I converted to Orthodoxy, I would more than likely be forced into a situation where I had to go be a nun. And so that wasn't really where my heart was at the time. I didn't want to be a monastic. Um, and it was really funny because like I didn't really understand how these things work. Like it's very, very, very hard to end up a monastic. Like it really has to be God's will. It's not something that like, oops, I just became a monastic. But I was really heavily told that with my sensitivities and everything that it would be difficult for me to live in the world. I would probably have to go to a monastery and I would probably end up a nun. And that was so this painting, it was kind of like representing my my sadness and sort of like this, not really knowing what to do about the situation, sort of wanting to convert for Christ, but not really wanting to go be a nun. You know, and then I guess the figures and the faces, they just kind of represented the oppression that I felt from the spiritual world at the time, and just knowing like that in order to feel better, like I would have to go be Christian, but I didn't feel like that was my calling to be a nun at the time.
Okay, so do you think the people who were telling you this, were they trying to talk you out of it, or were they just forced? I know you were involved with psychics. Were they foreseeing the future or trying to? What was that?
So I think with one party it was more of like a simple observation, like you're really sensitive, you're vulnerable, you're very affected by spiritual matters. You will probably end up at a monastery. You will probably end up a nun, and it seemed more of like a like an educated guess that became really bad logismy for me. And then another party was saying it more like you need magic to survive. You are so vulnerable to spiritual things that you need to be summoning spirits to basically keep you being able to do what normal people are doing, which means, engaging in sin, fornicating, going to parties, doing all this stuff like that. These things were affecting my soul so tangibly that they felt like I needed magic in order to be able to be numb to all these things.
The way that you're explaining this, it almost sounds like they were being maybe preying on your weakness or some. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but like you were almost. It sounds like you were vulnerable at that moment in time, and they were maybe trying to take advantage of the vulnerability from the way you're explaining this.
Yeah, well, when I think people that really work with spiritual, like with spirits, with as we would consider demons, like all the time, they're always getting information from them. They're always trying to contact them. Summon them for different things. Like the information that they're going to come up with is just sort of like directly from demons. Like the individual saying these things to you just sort of becomes a medium.
Okay.
And I guess, that's where the term medium comes from.
Interesting. I'm going to play this showing the book. It looks just really beautiful, really well done. I'm looking forward to getting this in the mail. It's a work of art. So some interesting things. People should just go check it out. So I'm going to remove that from the stage. And a little bit of snow again.
This is really ironic because I used to be a noise artist. I don't know if you knew that.
Right.
Power electronic artist. So, like, this would have been fantastic for me in another time, but at this moment.
I read on it said that you were an extreme music artist.
Yeah,
Hello? Oh, you're quiet. I can't hear you.
Oh, no. You can't hear me right now. It's so ironic. I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay. Now it's better. Now it's better.
Okay, classic.
What is extreme music?
Okay, so I was involved in noise music from ages probably 18 to 21 was when I stopped playing festivals and things like this and releasing new albums because I wanted to focus on my center for psychics and I wanted to be taken seriously. So I stopped dressing really goth and being involved in power electronics. But around that time period, probably the mid 2010s, I don't really know how things are now because culture just moves so rapidly. But there were the word like extreme music was sort of like a descriptor for like extreme genres. But I was a power electronics artist and it was a lot of like white noise. Static, screaming, obscenities. Basically just as abrasive as possible.
All right. So I think I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I'd like to start at the beginning, but first, can you, I want to just let you tell your story. And you've written a book about it, so you probably know your own story pretty well by now by writing this book. But first, where did the idea for the book come from? When did that start?
Okay, so, I was baptized at 22, but I didn't really convert until 23. And for the next few years, I was just really haunted by memories of what I had came from and the things that I had experienced. And it was so hard to get everything out of my head and move on. I had a lot of nightmares and things that I would become worried about moving forward in the future. And I talked to this reader at my church, and he just said something like, anything that stays with you after you come out of the water that you've repented of and everything is probably like staying for a reason. He mentioned like you should write a book. And then my godmother mentioned that I should write a book. So I ended up talking to my spiritual father about it because I started to feel like, there's something really wrong with me. I can't move on. And even though like I've repented, this isn't part of my life, but it just really disturbs me that all these things happen to me and there aren't a lot of resources for people coming from my situation. I ended up trying to convert with a few people, and I was the only one that made it to becoming Orthodox because there were so many challenges that came with converting from being a psychic and being involved in ceremonial magic at the same time, and and so I felt really alone at the time, and I felt like there was more that potentially could have been done for my friends. And
were your friends also psychics? Is that?
Yeah. One had gotten his abilities. Oh my god.
I think I'm just gonna.
Just kind of like write it out.
I'm just gonna leave it in. I think it kind of adds a little color to the interview.
Well, I would have thought this was so great. I would have thought this was so cool, at a certain time. Because I would have been like, wow, this is really complimenting the atmosphere of the genre that I work with. But yeah, I felt like there was probably like just something empty about the resources that I had. I didn't have a transition outside of Christ helping me. Like, there was nobody really that I could look up to or hear stories from. I saw like people around me that had converted from ceremonial magic and occultism and things like this, but not people that grew up with sort of like a debilitating spiritual oppression or psychic ability, which in of itself the word is really controversial, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of people. To some people it means like, oh, my cousin that collects crystals and annoys me sometimes, or it means like those people that are probably scamming me and ripping me off and cold reading me. And to me it meant not that. I would see all the different problems that my friends were going through and I was going through, and back when I was sort of like a public figure for psychic health and rights, like people would see my comics and they'd see my content and stuff like that, and they would be like, please help me, like I need help, I don't know what's going on with me, and the churches aren't helping me, the doctors aren't helping me, I'm telling people things that are coming true, I'm getting injured by demons, I know things about other people that are verified, and that's just not really something that they train you to manage in seminary, and that they sort of like train you to talk people down from. Because to me, I feel like intuiting what was going on in other people's heads was second nature to me. It was something that is part of my earliest memories and part of my earliest forms of encouragement. I was encouraged to do this growing up.
Okay.
So, like telling somebody to stop doing that is telling them to stop using their left arm, and that was so hard.
So who were the people who encouraged you to do this?
So I grew up in a family where the focus was really, really heavy on investing. I was, I just remember like my father having a conversation with me when I was about 5 or just very young. I just remember I was on an airplane and my feet were not touching the floor. Like I was a child. And he told me that he knew that I had an ability to get inside other people's heads and to know what they wanted, and that I was going to use that for business, and I was going to make a lot of money, more money than him, and he wanted to make that happen, and he had plans for me to do that. And so I was, that just kind of became the focal point of my life. As a child, I was, encouraged to learn like Chinese, repeat certain axioms about finance. I was constantly like listening to startup podcasts in the car, and playing video games about real estate, things like that. And it was really like some of the only times I've felt like, I think when I demonstrated sort of like a sense of business manipulation, that's when I felt like I was being a good daughter, or there, somebody was proud of me. So I think the point was to use it to make money, you know, in terms of investing and in terms of business. But I ended up sort of using these abilities to make money. But, you know, becoming a psychic, it has a bad reputation. Nobody really wants to be associated with that. That's sort of part of mainstream culture. But, you know, I had to go to all these, you know, meetings with accountants as a child. And, you know, I was like put in sort of like these rooms with a lot of other people's like investment children. And, you know, told like, you guys are the next generation. You guys need to all befriend each other. Which is just really funny because I'm sure they like saw this like slow decline or pretty fast decline. You know, when I started kind of being known for like avant-garde comedy and comics and psychic work. So
you started being what? How did you say?
More known for comics,
okay.
avant-garde comedies. Yeah, actually, I had a comic strip.
Oh, a comic strip. Okay, a comic.
Yeah, but then I also did like comedy.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, not like in the sense of like stand-up.
Oh.
Things like this.
Oh, you were temporarily removed and added back to the stage. You lost your avatar, but that's fine. It's just a picture of a person there.
Like oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
So what happened there? The people, the demons are trying to shut down this interview today. I think the forces of evil are
probably
conspiring
honestly
against us. We'll carry on. Wow. I mean, you've done this is wild.
That's essentially what it is, anyways.
Yeah, like this is almost like something out of a movie. You had like business people collecting their children and with psychic abilities in a room. Like this is like surreal. Like I didn't even know that this kind of thing even happened in real life. It's like. So, okay, you had a father who was trying to basically exploit this ability that you had. And then I think you mentioned you were a musician at age 18. So that's like maybe when did you leave home? What happened in the intervening years between your childhood and I'm trying to figure out the arc of the story here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think it got too stressful for me. I, you know, at some point probably had some like injuries to my liver as a child. Like probably from my life in between then. So my teenage years. I think I got very, very stressed. I felt trapped in this situation. I don't think that I wanted to join these like circles of investors, and I was being made to.
Circles of investors, is this like a common thing in, I don't know, Wall Street? Are they using psychics like up in the high rises in the, you know, in the suites of the high rises on Wall Street to like direct their investing decisions, or how prevalent is this?
I mean, I have no idea. I feel like there are just different layers of things. And, you know, my situation was I wasn't one on like a high layer, but the circles that I was in, I don't think, I'm not really sure that my father was actually like very conscious of the fact he wasn't using the word psychic. He was just using the words like get inside people's heads, know what they want, you know what to do, you know, like these kinds of things. He was actually Protestant. but was giving me lots of books on sort of like new age finance stuff, which was actually really similar in concept to grimoires. At one point in the book, like I kind of like realized at one point in my life, like poring over like tax code books every year is in order to like sort of like manipulate your finances is very similar to poring over like grimoires, instructional spell books in order to manipulate your reality for gain in certain areas of your life. And also, I don't know if this guy's around still, and I don't really want to name drop him, but there was this one occultist that would have these courses on like money magic. It went under like a different name, but he was talking about like the spirit of money and the spirit associated with money, and controlling it. And that was something that I learned a lot as a child, is that you don't work for money, money works for you. And so it was like this sort of like dominating of the concept of money. So as a child, you know, I started to have sort of these like sensitivities. I would see things. I started to sort of know things, but it didn't really bother me that much when, because I probably had damage to my liver at a young age, because I started, you know, it's like one day for no reason at all. Like, you know, you hit like a milestone or whatever. I was suddenly like allergic to every single thing that ever existed. I had to be on like 2 medicines every single day. So I do think that I had some damage. If you want to censor the word, that's fine, but it's something that still affects me to this day. I kind of grew out of my allergies, and I don't, you know, need to take medicine, but I react to pharmaceuticals sometimes as if it were like 100 times the amount. Like I take things that I'm not supposed to be able to feel, and I OD on them. And so natural medicine and herbs is the only stuff that like makes me feel safe. You know, it used to be like a nightmare of mine to like have to go have surgery and be under anesthesia and try to like communicate to them. No, I react to things as if they were, you know, several times the amount being administered to me. Then they don't believe me. I just pass away. But I think demons really took advantage of the situation, like in terms of temptations, look as me, because, you know, nobody really cared to figure out what was wrong with me, and like the you know, mainstream doctor circles, system, whatever, like nobody really thought like maybe there's a problem with her liver, and which there is, but I was just yeah. So anyways, I don't think that, like, I would say around middle school I started, you know, growing older. There's like puberty, emotions, hormones, things like this. My liver is very weakened. Then I'm also being pressured to sort of take over my family dynasty. And, you know, my father knew that his side was very intuitive. But it was, you know, it was really compartmentalized and managed. It was, yeah, we always know when somebody's pregnant before they know, or, you know, things like this, where you can talk to them about it, but you can't really use the word psychic or anything, or sensitivities or intuitive or whatever. They just sort of like accepted these things as like this fact, but that's not what's really important. What's really important is making money, and using your intuition to do that. And then my mother's family, Freemasons, Eastern Star on that side, and then her side of the family had a lot of like dreams coming true, visions, There was, some drama in there because of that. But
what's the Eastern Star? I'm sorry, I'm ignorant about that.
it's like the female version of the Freemasons.
Oh, okay.
So like you have the Freemasons for men, and then you have the Eastern Star for women.
Oh, right.
So yeah, that line ended with my great uncle. He ended up basically running away from the family and never talking to anybody ever again. And I think he was like the next person that was going to become a Freemason. So it kind of stopped, but the sensitivities, the visions passing out in church, things like this, that didn't stop. Then I got really hit with it, I guess from both sides of the family, the intuition, then plus like sort of like liver damage. Really, it was too much. And I think that also there was just like a lot of pressure from my parents to date certain people, to do certain things. And I ended up becoming pretty dissociative, which actually made my sensitivities worse and more pronounced. Because when you sort of like opt out of feeling emotion, when you feel numb, when you detach yourself from your situation, from your reality, it's kind of comparable to trance states that people go into when they're doing psychic work, when they want to go into like shamanic trance states, stuff like this. So you have a lot of dissociative people that actually sort of have some spiritual oppression going on sometimes, especially since some traditions, they will purposefully prey upon dissociative or sexually abused females in order to use them as mediums, because there's already that sort of surrendering that's going on to your trauma or to low energy demons, which makes them mentally more pliable. And so that was something that I learned later, as that stuff happened to me later on in life. But so I became dissociative, and I was like assessed by a lot of psychiatrists, brain specialists, psychologists, things like this. They all kind of agreed that what was bothering me the most was my insight into other people's minds. They're like, she's just like, they would just say things that were kind of new age. They're like, she's absorbing like way too much energy off of people. She's like way too perceptive of other people. And it's too stressful on her and her body. So they definitely started just prescribing me a lot of pharmaceuticals in order to be able to cope with the situation. And they also felt that I was potentially sexually abused, but I don't really have any memory of that. But they started prescribing me pharmaceuticals in order to be able to cope with the situation, but not really fix the situation. And that was really bad with my liver. I was constantly like reacting as if I had overdosed to different things, and I think that probably worsened my health. But when occultists sort of came into my life and picked me up, it was more like, it wasn't really like you have a problem with your liver. It was more like you're very, 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 very psychic. And that's why you're having all these problems with substances, is because you're sorting to like reacting to your surroundings to this like crazy degree. I have had some, like throughout my life, some sort of like knowing how a substance was going to affect me while holding it in my hand. I'm not really sure if it was some sort of like survival mechanism, intuition, like because nobody was around to help me through how, substances were going to affect me. So I feel like maybe I might have relied on my intuition or demons or something like this that wasn't, or maybe it was just like something that got allowed or whatever. But
can I break in here?
Sure.
You when you mentioned holding something in your hand and knowing how you would react to it, it sounds similar to muscle testing.
Really, what is that?
Okay, this is like a practice that I think it's from some alternative medicine practitioners will do. Well, they'll it's kind of similar to intuiting, but they'll put like a substance in your hand, say like a particular herb or some kind of like a particular vitamin, and then they'll hold your arm and they'll say now resist. And if you're strong, that's like a yes, and if you're weak, they'll like push against your arm, and if you become weak, they're testing your muscle, how it reacts to the substance that you're holding in your hand. And they know by the reaction whether that's something you need or you don't need. You haven't heard of that?
No, I've actually never heard of that, but that is really interesting. I'm definitely really open to being like learning new things about what happened to me, from any sort of, obviously like with discernment or whatever, like I would kind of talk about with my spiritual father and be like, hey, like, could this have been something that happened to me or whatever? But
what do you think about that idea? I mean, obviously you've never heard of muscle testing before, but does that sound like something going on with demons, or does that sound like it could be a legitimate practice? What do you think in your experience?
I don't know. I don't know too much about it. I haven't really seen it used in practice. I haven't read about it. But I also don't really trust my discernment anymore. Because I think that's just something that I need to step away from, is sort of like feeling like I know things because I don't know anything.
Okay.
But that's really interesting to know about. I might look into it just to kind of.
Yeah, I've heard about these ideas. Alternative medicine doctors will do this. And another test would be like dowsing.
What's that?
Well, like for example, like when the guy goes and finds water or whatever.
Okay.
He takes a stick and he can find it on a property. Put the well here, and he can find people. Some people are good at this kind of thing. Anyhow, I'm kind of
getting interesting.
I'm kind of getting the interview off track, but where were we? Right, you had tried some psychiatric medications, and then some occult people came into your life.
So they ended up settling on anti-anxiety medicine, which of course I reacted to as if it was being administered to me in a much larger dose. Mm-hmm. But it was really interesting because it was kind of like I was going through life drunk. I didn't really have that much of a concept of danger. So I felt, since I was in so much pain and nobody really understood what was happening to me and everything like this, I ended up getting into ceremonial magic and kind of trying to use my intuition to sort through books to see what was like, could be something that I could actually apply and use fast. Not really like the aesthetic stuff, the fluffy stuff. Like, I wanted books, I wanted knowledge. I wanted to become adept at this like immediately. And so and I didn't really feel like, I felt very detached from my family because they weren't able to do anything to help me, and I was kind of just like faking my way through life. I started to have these sort of like pseudo seizures. They would show up as not real seizures. They would show up as pseudo seizures. When I was monitored, I had like an EEG done to me, But then my voice would change, my personality would change, and I would start really scaring people. And then I would have this other like pseudo seizure again, and then I would return to normal. So essentially, I'm assuming that it was sort of like some form of demonic oppression, and that there was sort of like an entry exit point. But what they started doing to me in schools was, if I started like seizuring or like starting to have indications that my personality sort of might be switching over, they would lock me in this room by the nurse's office. So I spent a large part of my high school career locked in a room. And then, I would leave it and I would go to class and I would do my homework and things like this. And somehow I still managed to have friends, because, they were endeared to me for some reason. And, I was passing everything, it was fine. It felt like there was something so wrong with me that I like desperately needed help with. And, I was passing my classes. I was, somewhat able to drive. I was, able to attend like dinners with my extended family or whatever, and then just excuse myself. You
were somewhat able to drive. So were you like bouncing off other cars or sorry?
There was definitely like one instance where I kind of started doing a donut in the highway.
Oh, okay.
I was just like in a very bad place, but everybody really wanted to sweep what was happening to me under the rug, because I think that there was a lot of pressure to watch me recover and then for me to resume going back to this role, potentially making money for my family.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So, but I felt, very detached from everybody and everything. So I got really into the goth subculture around 14, and I got into shoegaze, and things of that nature. Shoegaze, it's this genre that's sort of like very, very noisy, lots of fuzz pedals, like rock.
Okay.
But it's kind of like slower. It's like a little bit like more ambient rock with like a lot of echo fuzz. It's called shoegaze because they look at the pedals on the floor so much while they're playing live shows.
Got it.
And then I think at the time I also had like a business, upcycling clothing and reselling it. I was doing a lot of things, but I was definitely like dealing with some form of spiritual oppression. And they actually warned substitute nurses not to call the police if they saw me. They said, just don't talk to her, don't make eye contact with her, don't listen to anything that she says, and just don't call the police. And I just remember one day, like, I like vaguely, sometimes I didn't remember everything that I did, but I remember like standing over the substitute nurse and like talking to her with like my head like tilted to the side and like laughing at her. And she was so scared, and she was on the phone with the regular nurse, and she was saying, are you sure that I don't need to call the police? And they're like, no, just tell her to go to the room, and she'll go to the room. But my family didn't really believe in the spiritual world. They went to church on Sundays sometimes when I was younger, but they would tell me sort of like the Bible, it could be metaphorical, we don't really know. So I was like, okay, these people don't really believe in anything, like in terms of structure. I mean, I feel bad saying that because, their faith was important to them in their own way. It's just really hard when you're being told it could be a metaphor. We don't really know. Like, he could have, it could have been, the years could have been different. Like, we don't really know anything. So I got more into esotericism. And so then when I was 17, I met somebody in a similar situation to me, and he had run away from home a couple times and, spent some time kind of being homeless, and then coming back. And he was a ceremonial magician, and he, like,
What does that
he
mean?
It means that you're reading a lot of grimoires, mostly from like the Renaissance era.
Grimoire? Is that
like spell books
Oh, okay.
to like summon demons, but it's ceremonial magic. It usually sort of like refers to sort of like Renaissance era spell books, But I mean, people will use the word like also, in relation to other lodges or schools of magic or whatever. It's sort of like a certain way of doing things where you where there's a lot of steps, and they're like ritual circles, and you're wearing robes, or there are different objects involved. And you're going through all these sort of blanks and incantations, or fasting, or you doing all these things in order to prepare to summon certain spirits, and then basically have them do your bidding. I mean, in some schools, and like some strains of thought, like you're binding them, and some strains of thought, you're making them offerings. But anyways, we were both really into that. And it kind of like gave birth to this really destructive relationship. Like whenever I watch Klaus Kenneth tell his story, or like I read his interviews and things like that, I always stop at the point where he's, saying that he would look into women's eyes and make them sleep with him. Because that's something that happened to me so often, frequently, like every day for years. I felt like my mind was gone. I didn't feel like I had any control over my mind, that I had no assertion, no boundaries. My father started treating me like I was worthless throughout my teenage years. Somebody recommended like putting a shock collar on me at some point. And every time that I dated somebody, he would like pull them aside and have a conversation and tell them that they didn't need to go through this, that they didn't need to date me. And at one point, he ended up giving this guy money to date me, and like he thought it was hilarious because he liked me, and he was like, yeah, okay, I'll take money to date your daughter, whatever. Like and it was one time, but it really affected me, and it really showed me like how willing he was to hand me off to whoever, strangers. He didn't care. Like what
was the purpose? Why did he do that?
He felt like anyone who was hanging out with me was losing, and he kind of just wanted like maybe like me off his hands or something, like out of the house, something, just somebody else to be responsible for me. Maybe, I don't know. I don't really know what the theory was, and it was always sort of like passed off as a joke, but it was very serious and very consistent. And it really made an impression on me that I wasn't, cared about in certain ways at home.
Okay.
I think that everybody has sort of a certain level of love for their kin, and, certain ideology behind, what they're doing and things like that. But I definitely didn't really feel like I had any worth. And, I felt like I didn't really have any, control over my mind, because I felt like I was sort of being forced to do things on a spiritual level. And I was, losing time a lot. Like I remember one time I was driving and I just started crying hysterically, and I was like, what happened? And I was like, oh my gosh, something really bad happened to me, and I remembered what had happened like 30 minutes prior or something. And you know, there was just a lot of like delayed responses to traumatic events, and they were constant. And I was often punched in front of other people, and they didn't do anything about it because I think there was a persuasive element to the situation to make everybody feel like it was normal, it was okay, that I just got punched, you know, or that I was being insulted. And it was so hard for me. Like, it was easy for me to forgive this person because we had grown up in very similar ways, and I understood, you know, like fear and need for control and like things like this. It was harder for me to forgive everybody that watched me go through this. And the sort of like the fear that it would just happen again, you know, like that nobody would intercede for you. So yeah, I think my situation got worse. Then this satanic cult, like, it was like this very big network, got into contact with him and said that they wanted to meet up with the both of us.
Who is this now? Who did your dad or your?
No, this was a network of Satanists.
And they connected with your boyfriend, or who was it?
They connected with my boyfriend.
Okay.
They have this initiation process where they meet with you first, and then the second time they kidnap you. And yeah. So the day before we were supposed to meet with them, because I didn't know much about the situation at all, and I was on anxiety medication, so I didn't really have any fear about anything. This thought came to me while we were at the gas station, and I was thinking about how he treated me, and I was thinking, do I deserve to be treated this way? And automatically I was like, yes, I do. I'm trash. I deserve to be treated this way. Absolutely. And then I thought about if I ever had children with him, and then like I couldn't even finish the thought, and I just immediately broke up with him. There was just like nothing. And he wouldn't let me, you know. He was like, and there was a lot of word use, like, nobody's ever going to understand you because you're psychic, like, you know, like, and I had faced like so much rejection from all of society because of my sensitivities, nobody really knowing what was going on with me and my intuition, and my dad not approving of how I had started to use it, and me not using it in ways that were socially acceptable. And so I genuinely like felt like there was nobody else taking care of me. You know, even though he wasn't, he was still with me all the time. You know, nobody else was. So anyways, I didn't end up going to meet up with the satanic cult, you know, like these two people that wanted to meet us too. He ended up getting kidnapped and initiated, because they ended up liking him. They didn't end up kidnapping me because they didn't meet me at that time. And so I really felt like God interceded for me at that moment. I still ended up doing work for them because at that time I really just gravitated to where the power was. People that were powerful, like I needed to know how to control my situation, and I just needed to know who was the most powerful person or group of people or thing, because I just needed control over my life. And so I ended up doing work for this organization, even though I wasn't officially initiated. I worked like in PR for them, which is why when I became progressively more Christian, they apparently started holding conference calls trying to figure out whether or not they should kill me, because it was just not an ideal situation for them, for somebody to be a public figure and to be promoting the stuff that they were putting out, the media that they were doing, and then become progressively more Christian. And so it kind of became this debate situation while I was converting, but I guess I'll get to that later. Yeah, I started doing work for them. I started doing psychic work. Nobody really started. The way that my family reacted to that was very different. My father told my mother that he didn't want to know anything about my life at all anymore. So I was basically like disowned. And the way that I told them, it was like I provided like physical proof that somebody had given me money. Then I like showed them what I had told them about themselves based on a picture. I said, that's a stranger. I told them that they had an orange cat, that they did this, that they feel this way about this, that they're doing this. This is how they feel about school. This is blah, 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 you know, and, yeah, and I think that was the day that my father told my mother that he didn't want to know anything about my life. And, you know, I kind of got a few warnings from other family members that took spirituality a little bit more seriously. And they're like, hey, be careful. And I was like, I am. And then we never really talked about it again. My spiritual state got worse and worse. Yeah. All right. I mean, I guess I was also doing power electronics and stuff like that. So then when I was 21, maybe I should go to that. I don't know. I was, you know, doing comics and things like this. And then I realized when I was doing a lecture one day in a different state, I realized, like, as somebody was talking to me, like, they're saying, oh, you know, you're the comic humor girl that's always like making fun of other occultists. I mean, people thought it was really funny, and they liked my comics and stuff like that. And I would do a lot of like occult humor and things like this. But I kind of realized I probably need to stop doing like power electronics and start dressing in a more boring way if I really want to help people like me. I started a 501c3, and I had a lot of other psychics that sort of gravitated towards my apartment, and people were always in and out of my apartment, experimenting, probably around 21. And then I was introduced to Orthodoxy at 21. Didn't really know what to do about that. I was starting my organization at the same time.
What was your introduction to Orthodoxy?
I went into an Orthodox church bookstore in order to buy incense. And what really made an impression on me is that the priest had me read Vespers the first time I was there. And I was stunned, like beyond stunned, because that really affected me, that they would just trust somebody off the street to read Vespers. And that, you know, they didn't know that I had a magic addiction. You know, I was doing ceremonial magic probably like 3 times a day. There are like different hours that correspond to different planets, you know, and then I would do incantations in different languages and summon spirits and do different things. And I was doing this to try to help my situation and try to help other people that were escaping occult abuse. I had one psychic that was living with me that had kind of escaped a situation in which like an occultist was trying to bring him to parties 24/7 and make him read everybody in the room, get inside the mind of everybody in the room, and then relay to him what they were thinking and what he should be doing. And then was sort of like behaving towards him in like very threatening ways, you know, not wanting him to leave the situation. And so he sort of escaped to my apartment because I had been doing magic from my apartment to conceal it from remote viewing. So this guy, the psychic would end up getting texts constantly while he was at my apartment, and it would be the occultist saying, "Where are you? Why don't I know where you are? Why can't I see you? Like, where are you right now?" And then he started asking him, like, "Where do you disappear from between these 2 hours every Thursday, or where were you last Tuesday between these hours?" And so that was really interesting for me and validating for me, because I felt like my magic was working.
So you had done some magic to make it so he would disappear?
Yeah, so that he would be able to be concealed, so that the occultist couldn't basically have demons tell him where this guy was located, or he couldn't remote view him. Sort of like these different forms of deception. So it was a form of deception for me, in the sense that, because demons can do anything, they can say anything, they can just stop giving this guy information at this certain time, and then suddenly that feeds my pride. It makes me think that, like, oh, I should just be doing more magic, this is great.
Okay, yeah, because it didn't make sense to me that a demon would, it's kind of like the from the gospel when they accuse Christ of, being the chief of the demons. The house is not divided, can a house be divided and still stand, so there must have been something going on, something else, like you said.
Yeah, I know somebody that came from a similar background to me, and they talked about their experiences more extensively with some of the monastics that I talk to on a regular basis, and he was saying that he once asked, one of the elders, like, "Hey, reading minds, like, I've experienced that so much in my life. Like, what is that? How is it demonic? What's happening?" And the monk said, "Listen, like, one demon gives somebody logismy, and then they tell the other person what that logismy was, then they infuse that person with pride, the confidence, in order to be able to, like, speak that they know what that logismy was, So one demon tells somebody, like, you're super worthless, and then they tell the second party, this person thinks that they're super worthless. You should definitely tell them that." And then that person says, like, "Hey, you think you're super worthless." And it's just like this stupid pinball machine, or like just like double teaming situation. But that was just like how he described that sort of like one situation. I guess there are different tactics and techniques in order to make people think that they have abilities and they've had 1,000 years of practice, and people are really predictable,
Right.
Okay, so I was introduced to Orthodoxy. I ended up seeing a picture of Elder Frem on the back of one of the books that was being sold in the bookstore. And I think that was a really pivotal moment in my life, because, and it's one of the quotes that I think they used to advertise my book. I was getting shown pictures, so many pictures every single day of different people for psychic work, to get information on them, for investing, for security, for protection, for gossip, like high school girls, does this boy like me, versus people that were like, hey, I'm going on tour and I need to know which person's houses that are, like, safe to stay at, or I'm going to give this person all my money. Will they invest it wisely? That kind of thing. That's the sort of work that I was doing. I also did a lot of work to keep people from getting canceled, or like people that got canceled, how to damage control that situation, like what to say to the public.
Hmm.
So yeah, I looked at his picture, and I saw that he was a saint, and I had never really seen a picture of a saint before. There are only so many like modern saints that we have. He's not officially canonized. I'm just telling you what my feeling was. I'm obviously not somebody that's in a position of a church authority, but he is really known for being extremely clairvoyant. So many people have came to him and he's just known their name, known what they did when they were 12 years old, that kind of situation. But I recognized that his clairvoyance was much different from mine, and I realized that if I tried to get inside his head, something very, 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 very bad would happen to me. And I didn't understand why that was. Like, suddenly I'm going to be in the wrong. So I didn't understand, like, why would I be in the wrong for something that I do every day that's something that I feel like I was born with, that God allowed, that I have no direction over, that nobody has given me any sort of moral compass for, that I refuse to have any sort of moral compass for, because I felt like people had really relinquished the rights to police me when they couldn't offer me any help as a teenager. I just felt like I was going to do whatever I wanted with my abilities, no matter what, and just nobody could stop me. Because people would be like, hey, what you're doing is wrong, getting inside people's heads. It's violating. And I'd be like, okay, well, if you want me to behave in a certain way with my abilities, maybe you should be providing more resources for people that have grown up like me. And maybe people should kind of get over their like recent WASP thing, like that, like a Protestant, like not really interested in spiritual reality sort of thing that's happening in like recent Americana, because it's not even like an Anglo-Saxon thing. UK, Britain, they have John Dee, they have Edward Kelly, they have Cunnington traditions, they have certain traditions surrounding astrology that's more like rooted in ceremonial magic. Like, it's very, very recent that people in like the US or in westernized society suddenly like believe that magic doesn't exist, psychics don't exist. If you go to South America, that's not the case. If you go to so many other parts of the world, it's not the case. You talk to somebody from a different culture, their grandmother will tell you that's not the case. I would stop on the street all the time and people would ask me if I was a psychic worker. And they'd have different names for it depending on the culture, that kind of thing. It's not even like a Protestant thing. There are a lot of Protestant grimoires out there. It's very recent that everybody stopped believing psychics are real, magic is real. And I think that part of the aversion people have towards psychics isn't so much about scamming, cold reading, whatever. I think that there's a natural human aversion to understanding that you're being manipulated on some level. And I think that people that are being manipulated spiritually and are engaging in psychic work, because of the deceptions that they're facing, the manipulation that they're facing, I think that people can kind of sense that there's something else at play here, and it makes them kind of sussed out. And I think that's why, like, there is partially like an aversion to psychics. And then obviously like the cold reading, I never got into NLP and things like this. But I was accused of doing NLP, like neuro-linguistics programming, at some points in my career. I purposefully never read any of these books on cold reading, on manipulation that didn't rely on intuition, because I was really a purist. I didn't want to accidentally be using some of these techniques or absorbing some of these techniques. But really, these books are adversarial. They're written by demons anyways. So, I mean, really, what's the point of getting information straight from a demon versus like using a technique that a demon developed.
Hmm.
And then as for like the inconsistencies in like psychic work, you'll have people like making YouTube videos like, oh, we're gonna expose the psychic. Oh, they're just like scamming everybody and they're all fake. And like it's this really big deal, and people get like so worked up about this. Like people have these really intense emotions towards psychics. Again, I think probably because they sense that there's some sort of spiritual manipulation that's happening. And they don't see psychics as like the like wayward victim in the situation, or maybe like the person that's suffering that becomes the predator or whatever. They don't really see these people as human. They're just like so excited to just like pwn them, and it's just really interesting because I watched one of these videos at one point, and I think I like watched the Blair White one, where Blair goes to a psychic and they're like, I'm sensing a lot of like male energy inside you. Are you pregnant? And like Blair's like, no, you stupid idiot. Ha 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 ha. I'm just trans, and it's like, okay, like I don't really care if like somebody's misinterpreting whatever information that they're intuiting from demons. And I had like a friend that once went to another psychic, and she said like that she could see the spirit talking in the psychic's ear and feeding her wrong information. She just asked me why that was. She was just like what's going on, And I think as psychics, you tend to be, a lot of us tended to be, maybe me more than others, like obsessed with discernment, perfection, making sure that you weren't being tricked by spirits, making sure that you were interpreting information correctly, that you were intuiting. And I think that's part of what led me to Orthodoxy, was that I wanted to know what had been talking to me, what had been entering and exiting my body since I was a child, teenage years, early teenage years. It was more of a life and death situation for me. I felt like I needed to know exactly what was happening to me, what was happening to my body, and I was going to find it out. And so for a while, I became really interested in like the concept of energy signatures or seals. Like, how do you consistently know that what you're contacting is actually what you're contacting? Unfortunately, later, I end up doing my college thesis on Faust. Are you familiar with Faust?
It's a play. I don't think I've ever read it.
Yeah. So it's a play about a ceremonial magician. There are different versions of this play, but every time that a new version of this play would come out, there would be like a grimoire that he had supposedly written that came out just slightly afterwards. And so I started to kind of believe that these grimoires weren't really infallible, and that they were just kind of like a tool that the adversary was using. Like, it started to feel like in some cases it was fan fiction. Like some were allegedly written by King Solomon, but then there are debates about like the translation of the inscriptions on the seals, and like would that have actually been the wording that was used in that time period and stuff like that. And so you kind of have to admit to yourself at some point, like, do you actually believe that Faust wrote these grimoires? Do you actually believe that Solomon wrote these grimoires? Or do you just not care? And I think for a long time, I didn't really care that much. But as I grew older and I realized, like, deception is real, my accuracy rate is real, what's happening to my body is real, I need to know what's going on with me, and I need to know the truth about it. Like, you will probably start to, gravitate towards Orthodoxy. I was reading I was trying to read a lot of like Catholic books on spirit discernment, things like this. But what's fascinating about my journey to Orthodoxy is that I had to give up on trying to get information from books about what was happening to me, and information from other people about what was happening to me, and just realize that, like the psychics around me, our health was improving. being around churches, having access to sacraments, that there was something tangible happening. And when I trusted that, I started to get more answers about things that had been going on in my life, and I started to find a lot more writings on that over time.
So, but you mentioned at the beginning of the interview that you were baptized in did you say 20 or 2021?
I was baptized in 2018.
2018, but that you didn't convert until later. Could you explain how that happened?
Absolutely. So, I was exposed to Orthodoxy when I was 21. You know, and I would bring psychics to church, and I would say, like, hey, we're gonna go to church, then we're gonna go back to my apartment and do more experimentation with, you know, these and these psychic techniques. You know, we're gonna have a meal, and there's like sort of like community involved, like a lot of people that are just kind of like neglected by society. You know, being able to sort of like have fun with their abilities. But I was like, there's something really tangible happening at this church that I go to. We're gonna go here first. And so I would bring different psychics to church each week. You know, sometimes they wouldn't want to go. Sometimes they'd be like, all right, I went once, or I want to go this time. One ended up actually being catechumen. But yeah, at one point I kind of tried to open up to my priest about what had been happening to me, in terms of like ritual abuse, convulsions, personality changes, potentially like channeling, letting demons inside my body inhabit my body. Because, you know, later on I was used as a channel a lot. People would have demons occupy my body in order to talk to them. And I talk about that in my book. I give an example of one situation in which that happened. That's like one of my strongest memories in that regard. But I would not blink during these points where I would have a seizure. Then this, you know, demon would occupy my body. Then I would give people information about things, and I would have another seizure. So they would have to tell me to blink. Or they would have to tell the spirit inside my body to have me blink, because like tears would be streaming down my face. My contacts would like crumple up and fall off of my eyeballs. So that chapter is called Blink and Drink, because oftentimes I was really offered a lot of like water afterwards, because it was really stressful in my body. I wouldn't be able to get off the floor. So I started trying to explain these things to my priest, but I was crying hysterically while I was doing this. He didn't really know what I was saying, and I think I was too scared to elaborate. So he just kind of gave up on trying to understand what I was communicating. And I think that night I just like realized there was no place for me inside the church. And I had been interested in trying to convert to Catholicism in the sense that I wanted to get baptized, because part of blasphemous traditions, like certain ceremonial magic traditions, is, you know, you get baptized, then you sort of start following different things inside the church, but then also summoning demons at the same time. And so that really appealed to me. I wanted to do that. I ended up trying to make that work with Orthodoxy. Obviously, it didn't work out. But I felt like there was no place for me inside the church. So I started listening to occultists, like coaching me on how to give like a life confession, where you confess that you did magic, but you don't really let on how much magic you've done, how much you're planning to do in the future, things of this nature, because they're like, they will not understand you. Your priest will not be able to help you. There is nothing in that church that will be able to soothe your needs.
How did they even know what a life confession was?
Because there are a lot of occultists that are inside the church, more so in the Catholic Church than the Orthodox Church. I think that's also like a result of colonization. You know, you have Catholics going to different territories and lands and being like, okay, everybody convert or die, right? So then, everybody sort of like practicing sort of like Santeria or like voodoo or like things like this, they sort of have to repackage their own religion like inside a Catholic context. So there are like corresponding saints that correspond to like other spirits. So you could have like an icon of a saint in your house and like say, that actually corresponds to a specific spirit that's part of a different religion. So you had people like that doing, going in that direction, but then you also have people that have spell books that are attributed to like certain heretical clergy members and things like this, or like heretical Catholic Protestant grimoires. So they kind of like insert themselves within the church setting, but are still doing magic. There are different like branches of like heretical Catholicism. And so I was friends with all these people, and I felt like, maybe this was the direction that I wanted to go in, but at this Orthodox church.
All right. So you weren't completely sincere when you were entering the church?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I was not. That doesn't mean that it didn't affect me. I was really affected. Like I got triple immersion baptized. Really grateful for that because it was interesting. There was actually miscommunication, misunderstanding because I had gotten triple immersion Protestant baptized before. My priest thought that he had asked me if I had, and I had said no. So he actually found out when it was like too late. And so they triple immersion baptized me, and I'm very grateful for that because I feel like that really helped me. I got out of the water and I felt like screaming. Everything was like so bright. Everything was like this bright white light, and it was just so intense. For me, I genuinely felt like screaming. And I realized like that when I removed my cross, like the world became darker. And so I never removed my baptismal cross ever again.
Did you have an exorcism? Did you have a service done when you were made a catechumen?
I did, yeah. But I mean, if you keep inviting these things back into your body, and you're like actively doing magic, you're just overriding it, like you're like through your free will.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The only way, so after baptism, you're the only way you can have become possessed again is if you let it happen, like you said, of your free will.
Yeah. There's this really great story in my elder Joseph that my spiritual father told to me once. It was concerning seeing demons. He was like, there was this one guy, and he saw a demon in front of somebody else. And he took an axe to the demon, and it hit, the person in front of him, or the person behind where the demon appeared to him. So he had just killed this man with an axe because of this demon that he saw in front of him. And he's like, you really just can't trust anything that you see. And then I think from that point on, later when I had heard that story, I just, I kind of realized like, wow, I really can't trust anything that I see. Like, I didn't really understand what my spiritual father was talking about. Because he was kind of like focusing on more like, the guy looked really peaceful after he did that because he truly believed that he had killed a demon. Like the deception, it doesn't mean that a demon didn't appear in front of that guy. It means that he was tricked, and I think that's like a really important distinction to make, like, because popular culture and society is so enthralled by being like, oh, none of these things exist, that I think people that are really interested in magic or psychic work, it's difficult for them to have their experiences dismissed in this way. But within Orthodoxy, it's like, okay, it doesn't mean that the demon didn't appear in front of that guy. It just means that guy was tricked. Now he murdered somebody. You cannot consent to that trickery. But anyways, that's off topic.
Right. So how did your conversion come about?
So I was receiving communion. I was still doing magic. I started getting sicker. I think I genuinely, I have some serious medical problems to this day that are considered enigmatic. But basically, my body stopped being able to do certain things or metabolize food in certain ways. And basically it just led to all these very intense symptoms. And yeah, it was very interesting. But so, I mean, that's not why I converted, but that was just kind of the time period. I was working at the center. I was, working on my nonprofit for psychics. I was doing a lot of Freedom of Information Act reading, a lot of CIA declassifieds that I was repackaging and making them digestible to people, and then reading a lot of books about the abuse of psychics. A lot of experimentation that was done on psychics until they died from the experimentation. So I was just really pushing, listen, these people exist, these things exist, sort of awareness for this, and then also trying to figure out solutions in order to help people live higher quality lives with sensitivities. And I was part of sort of the heretical exorcism scene, Occult is kind of giving people exorcisms, and then also kind of providing information and resources, depending also on what your cultural preference was. If you preferred to kind of use this magic over this magic, it was very magic based, but it was also whatever works for you based. That, different societies have different ways of dealing with these issues. If you're dealing with it, congratulations. But we realized that Christianity was having a significant effect on psychic people. That it was improving their livelihood and health and protecting them. And that also sort of.
So your health, you had mentioned before that your health was improving at one point, right? From being around church.
It was improving, but it was also not, in the sense that I felt more protected from demons in the spiritual world and things like this. But I felt I also felt sickness and guilt was really weighing on me from practicing magic while also receiving the sacraments.
Okay, so okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to know. I was wondering about that.
I was getting attacked less. Demons stopped taking my body as much, and I felt this sense of protection. But physically I did not feel well, and I felt worse, and I felt it was probably really weighing on me that I was taking these sacraments
unworthily, as St. Paul says it.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so then we kind of realized shadow work was really an interesting direction to go in. There was this one school of it where basically people were understanding basically their temptations and the psychology behind them, and kind of like becoming more aware of their trauma and how it was affecting spiritual warfare. So I think what my takeaway from that is that like demons or negative spirits or whatever your culture calls them will probably be more attracted to you if you have like some sort of unresolved pain or wound, like that will probably be exploited. And so being sort of aware of these wounds makes the exploitation less severe. So I think it was a combination of that and exposure to Orthodoxy that was of interest to me.
Okay. And so your full conversion came about when, do you think? When you say that?
My treasurer started refusing to sign paperwork for the organization because he wanted to go back to Christianity. He had actually sort of become interested in like internet orthodoxy, and had grown to respect it, and he felt like he wanted to convert to orthodoxy. And he started being like, yeah, I'm not going to sign any of this paperwork anymore. You can still kind of keep me as your treasurer, like until, we vote me out or whatever, but I'm going to basically like block all of your actions. Which was like so frustrating for me.
So this is your 50, you had a 501c3, you said, right? That was your...
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so I remember because I left class. I was in college at the time, and I was on the phone with him in the bathroom, and I'm like, what do you mean you're not going to sign any of my paperwork? This is horrendous. And he's like, listen, like you're sending people free talismans, like all over the US and different continents and things like this, like to improve their quality of life using magic and things like this. You don't need magic, and you know that like Christianity is improving things on a spiritual level for people, like their spiritual health. Sorry, I should have like clarified earlier. Like I felt spiritually better being close to the church, but physically things were weakening for me. Okay. So he was like,
God was awaiting you. He was he was patiently waiting for you to come around, I guess. God was, he was
God was really patient for me.
Yes, he was being, well, he understands. Yeah, he understands what you've been through. So he was being diplomatic, I guess you could say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right word, but to apply to...
I've really felt the effects of accountability. I've really felt the effects of accountability in the sense that later in life, when I stopped actively reading people, I didn't even like realize that I stopped. Because I was probably 25. I was able to stop. And maybe 6 months later, when I encountered a difficult situation, there was this temptation to get inside somebody's head using a photograph of them. And I tried this, and I vomited like 7 times in a row. And I had to call out of work. And it was really interesting, like my body telling me like, I can't do this anymore. This is something I've grown out of. This is something that there's no longer a certain level of spiritual patience for me with because of my circumstances. I know better. Like, I shouldn't be reading people like this. I now am able to not. And now I'll pay the price if I do. So yeah, my treasure was like, I grew up Protestant, but people really took spiritual gifts and prophecy and things like this very seriously. Like people do exist inside the church that kind of deal with like parapsychological stuff or gifts or whatever. And just because you came from more of like a materialist Protestant situation where the focus was not on the spiritual world, and then your home life was about, you know, psychism and money and like new age stuff. Like, that doesn't mean that the rest of the world is operating like this, and there is actually a place for you inside Christianity. So he really just, like, I was very close to the edge, and he really just pushed me over. And then, but I really, in my book, I really felt like the point where I actually really converted was when I threw out all of my my ritual daggers, all of my weapons, and all of my comics. I destroyed the strip that I had become known for and popular for. So there was like no trace of any of my work. And the comic was very important to me in the sense that it helped me keep track of time. It was a diary. I had thousands of people reading my diary every single day. It was like a tool to sort of get concepts across that I wanted to get across. It was just like a very nice brain project for me. It was almost like a political cartoon strip. But I really loved weapons. I modified a lot of ritual daggers, throwing knives, things of this nature. So it was more like, instead of like relying on like weapons and like this sort of like raw sort of violence to protect myself, you know, kind of like in the spiritual world and not, I started to rely on God, and that was tremendous for me. That was so hard for me. And that, but in that moment that I got rid of these things, like, it felt like this huge moment. I felt this like huge shift in terms of my life, and I felt like God would give me things that I didn't know that I wanted, which was very true. Yeah, so that, I think that was like the time that I converted. I burned my whole library. I had like a very extensive occult library, and you know, maybe 3 out of 5 of the people on my board of directors started, you know, seriously pursuing Orthodoxy. So we liquidated the nonprofit, and we burned all the books. But one of the occultists in my apartment refused to convert. You know, obviously free will, like, it was like whatever to us. But he started hoarding the books to sort of keep them safe while we were burning like massive carloads, in several increments. I think this was actually during Holy Week, because I remember going to unction service and smelling like burnt paper and plastic and cardboard. But I mean, I think that's really wonderful. And then I think my friend was like, "Hey, it's Holy Week. I'm not missing these services. We're going after we burn all these books." And I was like, "Okay." But yeah, it was a really interesting time for sure. But there was a lot of like burning most of my possessions. Maybe like 75% of my apartment was burned. And you know, I kind of gave up my love of weaponry at that point. And I think that, you know, posed another problem for me, because, you know, the Satanists that I had worked for, because I worked for this one, you know, specific network, I had, you know, ties to a lot of different organizations, schools of thought, and people. But this one network specifically was very angry at me for converting to Christianity. And so with all the drama surrounding what, should we kill her, should we not, I had to kind of take that more seriously. My employer at the time that was part of that network was involved in these conference calls, and he was like very defensive of me. They were very annoyed at him for this, but he was really confident, like, things will blow over. I don't think they're going to end up killing you. I think that I can talk them out of this. And I was more concerned. And in this specific group, they have this like law that if they come and they try to kill you and you don't show any fear and you only show straight violence, they'll leave you alive. So I knew that an option that I had was to kind of commit myself mentally to defending myself to a degree that was inhuman. Or the other option I had was to talk to my priest. So, so I went to my priest, and he had experience with a lot of like ex-gang members and things like this. And so I hadn't really talked to him about where I'd come from because I didn't really feel like he would understand me. And the world that I was dealing with, the problems I was dealing with. But I basically said that I had converted from a gang situation. They were mad at me for converting. They were thinking about killing me. I would like to not fear death. What do I do? And at first he was like, which gang? What gang? I know all the gangs. And I was like, no, I don't think you've heard of this one. And I kind of felt like really hipster about it, like 2012 hipster, like you probably never heard of this band, but like he was kind of like, no, I know all the gangs, and I was like, no, you probably never heard of this one, but anyways, please tell me how to not fear death. So he talked to me about martyrdom, and he was like, listen, you converted, you're baptized now. He didn't really understand that I had just converted. But poor guy. May God bless him. But he was like, he talked to me about martyrdom, and he's like, if they kill you, you die for Christ, you don't do anything. Don't do anything. Don't fight back, don't do anything. And that was really helpful for me, and I'll forever remember that conversation. And so I decided to kind of like stop looking at my door like people could come through at any moment, because hundreds of occultists at this time had my address. And it was also attached to the organization, like filing papers and all that stuff. So I wasn't really in a safe situation, but I decided to completely let God control whether I lived or died. And after I made that decision, things came up for this group of Satanists, this network. They actually received national attention at one point. Suddenly they had like bigger things that they needed to deal with. So they kind of stopped talking about me for a while. And during this time, my roommate that was an occultist that didn't convert with us ended up having a psychotic break. And I say psychotic in the sense that it's really common for psychics and occultists to lose grasp of reality, unfortunately. It's the worst thing to watch. It really is. It's the worst. Because basically, like, demons will start feeding them wrong information, and it's so painful to watch. I've had it happen. I had it happen to my roommate, my boyfriend, and a family member of mine that I was very close to right after I converted within the span of 3 months. It was like these very intense temptations. But my roommate, it's so hard because you'll be having a conversation with somebody and you'll be like, hey, will you pass me that piece of chicken? And they'll say like, they'll think that you said something completely different, or that you secretly like meant something completely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the conversation just progresses like that, and it turns into you trying to convince them like, no, seriously, I just wanted the piece of chicken. And like, so he ended up thinking that we wanted to kill him. So he felt that every time I was talking about my boyfriend, I was probably secretly talking about him and plotting to kill him. So we got like freaked out, me and my friend that were living there. She's like my secretary. So we ended up evacuating because he was it could have progressed into a very dangerous situation for us. So we ended up evacuating. He, at some point, also left the apartment. Then we kind of like got our stuff out and moved in a very short period of time. And so later in retrospect, I kind of saw this as like a fresh start for me. Like, that God had provided a new location for me where occultists didn't really know where I lived anymore. And it was very like coincidental in the sense that suddenly like these people that wanted to kill me, they got distracted, you know, they had to deal with some being on the news or whatever. And then suddenly like I had to change locations. And so I felt more secure in where I was. Yeah. So yeah. So anyways, God interceded for me. It's great.
Okay. I understand there's a section in your book about making the decision between monasticism and marriage. Can you say a few words about that, and maybe how you have gone about making that decision for yourself?
Yeah. So So, you know, my priest, before I was really open with him, and you know, I was kind of like watching all of the behaviors that parishioners were exhibiting in regards to psychics. He kept kind of mentioning this one story where this girl could see demons and they were very ugly and it was terrible, and she had to go be a nun. And so later, when I was kind of honest with him about what I was going through, he was like, you know, maybe you need to go be a nun. And that's always been like a huge temptation for me, because occultists had always, you know, told me like they use monasticism as a threat for me. You know, like if you convert, you're gonna have to be a monastic, so you better want that because that's what's gonna happen to you, you know. And it was like a huge source of logismy. And so I went to a monastery before I actually converted to see, and it felt like medicine to me. It felt like the medicine that I had been craving my entire life, being in a monastic environment. And it felt like everything that pharmaceuticals couldn't do for me as like a spiritually oppressed person. But you know, at that time, you know, I decided, you know, it wasn't for me. I kind of elaborated more on what I was experiencing at that time. You know, it was very interesting because I would see demons banging on the walls outside of the monastery, like screaming at the nuns to try to distract them. I didn't know that was like a real thing until I read the Philokalia like much later. But it was interesting, like having these observations and personal feelings and things like that. And so I kept kind of discerning monasticism, and then, you know, realizing that I couldn't do it and stuff like that. And so then after my book was done, it was this book, like I was worried that it would tempt me to pride, you know, and it turned out to be one of the most humiliating things that I've ever done in my entire life, because it kind of outlines all of my mistakes and everything very disgusting about me. And it's not flattering. And I was just so distraught by this, and I just wanted to give everything up to God. So then I seriously pursued monasticism, and you know, that was a very interesting situation because of my background and the rites that I've given demons in the past, and me, you know, going back on my baptismal vow. Which is interesting to me because everybody was like, you broke your baptismal vow, like in confession. And it was so confusing because to me, it was like, no, I came into this from like a blasphemous culture, and it was like a linear progression, for me. Like I saw my progression as linear, and whereas they saw it as like, no, you entered an institution, you made a vow, you broke it. It didn't really like matter what cultural context I was coming from. And since since I've like grown in my Orthodox faith and stuff, like I understand the legitimacy in that. And I think that really limited my options.
I feel
in what I perceived.
I feel like I break my vow all the time. Sorry.
Yeah, but yeah. I
Through
mean, so many demons,
weakness.
like, yeah, I know what you mean. But I had issues for a long time with demons, like yelling at me, strangling me, injuring me. And I would still see them around everywhere, and so kind of like the book kind of talks about that. So it ended up, God had something really specific in mind for me. Glory to God, thank God. I ended up, in a situation with my life where those are not my temptations anymore. I don't get physically attacked in the same way anymore. And I think that part of that has to do with potentially with sacrifice. Because I remember somebody once wanted to marry me, and it was really interesting because his full intention was to take on part of my burden. And that was very interesting because suddenly I did not get attacked as much. And so there's something to like Christ sacrificing himself for us, people sacrificing themselves for each other. I ended up being in a situation where I sacrificed myself for somebody, and I do not deal with physical attacks anymore. And God had a very specific situation in mind for me, and it turned out to be a perfect thing for me. But yeah, I did suffer from a lot of displacement, lots of logismy about monasticism, and a lot of trying to figure out which monastery to go to because it would have been controversial for some monasteries to pick me up. Not like controversial in the sense that anybody would have known who I was or what I was going through, but it would have been trickier. I was presented with like alternative options, like being a nun without being tonsured, things of this nature. I ended up, in a situation God had designed for me. Thank God. And anybody that's like listening to this, there's a very specific situation for you, and I think that the logismy that I was struggling with in regards to monasticism was stupid. Like, obviously people can have this logismy and it's like very valid and it's very painful at the time and things like this, but like to feel like, oh no, I'm doomed, that's something I'm gonna fall into. It's a very unique life, and it has to be something that God wills for you. And it has to be something that you fully want. So whatever happens to you, it's going to be something that you fully want and that you fully feel is right and that God has designed for you.
So it sounds you're kind of describing maybe some special circumstance for your. That's not exactly. It doesn't sound like you were able to actually join a monastery. Is that right?
I mean, I'd prefer not to say exactly like what my current situation is, just like for the sake of anonymity. But yeah, I will say that I was faced with like a lot of different options, a lot of different circumstances, and a lot of like very intense emotions. I think yeah, definitely.
I'll look forward to reading that section. I've struggled with this whole question myself quite a bit. When I came into the church, I was I made a beeline to the monasteries. I thought I was going to be a monk. I wanted to be a monk, but it was determined because of my mental illness that it wasn't possible for me. And truth be told, I probably can't get married. It's just a disability that's very, very serious. So I'm sort of stuck alone in the world, and I strive to have some semblance of monastic discipline in my life. But anyhow, yeah, sounds
Isn't that like the most heartbreaking experience? Like when you like want to marry God, you like when you want to give up your entire life for God, and then like that situation like doesn't work out. I feel like it's almost like a worse feeling than
well,
like
it's
breaking up with you.
the problem is sort of being in a limbo kind of between, because you haven't had the tonsure, you haven't been married, so there's like the sacrament hasn't been completed, right? But
Right.
I believe that for those people who are alone in the world, they're essentially they should be, unless they're just living for themselves. What they should be is a monastic. They should try to be a monastic in a special. It's kind of a special calling without having to tonsure, like So, yeah, your relationship with you can still have a that special relationship with God. I believe it's possible.
No, it's 100% possible. I think that when that was really being sold to me as the situation that I would be a really good option for me to choose, which it was great. I just knew that in my weakness, I would probably have to either find another monastery or go get married, because I just didn't have that discipline to be in limbo. But it's admirable. But they used to like. They say, during the communist period, you have a lot of people that were kicked out of monasteries that were still respecting their vows. And they're like, there's really nothing wrong with that. But yeah, with that monastery specifically, they basically told me, because of the rites that I had given to demons, that demons would be injuring me so frequently that they wouldn't be able to afford my hospital bills. So that was very difficult. Yeah, and then that wasn't the only option, for me, but that wasn't something that I could personally do, but I admired that, because you have so many saints that were in limbo like that, and I think that it takes so much discipline to be in the world and have those vows, and or to have that mindset that you've committed to, without like the environment really locking you into that and reminding you of that, and like the clothing reminding you of that,
reminding you of
like the fact that you're living like a monastic life.
Oh, right, yeah, you don't have that, right? It's actually, I don't know, I would propose that it's probably the most difficult path.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. I mean, I haven't tried all of them, but it seemed like the most difficult path for me. So I commend you, sir.
So I think I think we've got your story. I mean, is there anything else you want to say?
Not really. I guess, like, if you're watching this and you're struggling with like parapsychological ability or like demonic oppression or things like that, first of all, I'm very, very sorry that this is happening to you. And really, God will actually provide protection for you and provide you with the things that you're looking for.
I did want to ask, You were saying how, you know, the world doesn't believe in these phenomena. They don't think it's real, but it seems like maybe in the last 20 years or so that this occult phenomena, like the practice of the occult, it seems, from your experience, do you think that's something that has become more prevalent in our society? Because I mean, I don't remember growing up. When I was growing up, I didn't see anything. I didn't know anybody who practiced magic. I never met anything like that. Like very rarely, if ever. Do you think that that's something that's becoming more prevalent today?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about it, because I have to talk about my life, doing this interview, and I was just thinking back on like the experiences I've had, and I feel like they're just getting so much worse. Like having to deal with a satanic network that may or may not want to kill you or kidnap you or whatever. Like I feel like things are getting worse. I feel like that would have been unreal and unheard of to generations before me. And I can't even begin to expect what generations, moving forward are exposed to and are dealing with. But I thank God that, God really understands what you're capable of and what you've been exposed to.
Also, I had another question. You don't have to answer this if you don't want. I did have an experience once in my life, and I guess I was ignorant when I did it. My friend took me to a palm reader on a beach, like down in I was hearing some feedback. What was going on? Like I went and I saw this palm reader. Like, what is he doing?
I mean, did he touch your palm? Or like look at lines on your palm?
Lines, yeah, the lines. And then he just started talking for like 3 minutes straight, and he just rattled off a big, he told me about myself and all this. And what was going on with that? What are they doing?
So like occultism, it's really interesting because it's like this consensual induced schizophrenia in the sense that it's like, well, first of all, there's like a separation from the physical, and then it's like a commitment to this code that's overlaid over reality, and kind of like using symbolism and physical objects and indications in order to sort of like have communication with the spiritual world, with demons, but it's like it took me a long time to reprogram my brain from like seeing an herb and being like, okay, that's associated with this planet, this planet, this planet, this planet, these offerings to this spirit, these offerings to this spirit. In this tradition, it's associated with this, and with this, it's associated with this. And you like, everybody sort of has this long list of associations that they're struggling with or they're coming from, like aura reading. Some books will tell you like, oh, if you see somebody's aura and it's yellow, that means they're happy. That's actually just like one person's interpretation of gaining similar information or information from demons. So like yellow could mean something completely different to somebody else, and it's like everybody's coming from a different system and a different way of looking at things. Like I used to do bone throwing on top of tarot spreads, like you have a lot of symbolism, you have a lot of like crypto association that goes into people's perception of reality. And it really is, it kind of like acts as an intellectual stimulant and like a source of like creativity, but also it acts as sort of like this buffer, this medium between yourself and like the language of the demons. So
excuse me. Okay. Yeah, I feel like that was like a mistake for me. Like now that I'm a Christian and I look back on that, I'm thinking like that doing something like that even stays with me. I feel like, something I shouldn't have done. And I suffer like the results of those kind of actions even before I was a Christian, even though I've been baptized and all that.
Yeah. I mean, consent.
Yeah.
I remember like I would touch people's faces and read them like while I was performing as performance art, like while I was on stage playing shows. And some people would react like they really liked it, or they would, start crying, or they would push me or hit me. I think that it's really interesting, how people consent to, like a crossing of spiritual boundaries. Some people are like, no, get away from me. Some people are like, great, something to trauma spiral with, or to like stimulate my brain or my creativity, or because I'm bored. Yeah.
I remember I asked him, what kind of question is this? I asked him at the end after he had read my poem. I said, do I believe in God? And that must have been just like the question that was weighing on my soul. So it was the question I had been, does God exist? This is something I had been thinking about for many years. And I asked this psychic about that. He said, his answer was basically, well, any idiot could tell that God exists.
That's funny. That really reminds me of like psychic addiction. People, they become addicted to getting readings from psychics because they want somebody to sort out reality for them. And
but I think go ahead.
But it's like, I'm not saying that that's what happened to you, but sometimes like it's really tempting to go to other people with things that you're unsure about, and then especially things that you're that like really you grapple with.
Yeah. I don't think his understanding of God was necessarily a correct understanding, though. But I think I somehow I must have adopted his understanding at that time. In any case, it all was eventually redeemed in Christ. So, this has been a great interview, a long one, and you've gone through and told your story, which itself is probably, even just retelling a personal story that involves trauma can be traumatic a little bit in itself. So I thank you for doing that. Thank you for coming on the show. I want everybody to go and take a look at the book. It's on newmartyrpress.com, and I will include that in the link in the description. Is there anything you want to say about New Martyr Press?
No.
Okay.
I like them. I like the posters. I like the direction that things are going with the risographs. I think it's kind of important to sort of combine things that aren't necessarily associated with orthodoxy in ways that are not damaging. You know what I mean?
Yeah, interesting.
Like riso culture. Yeah, they've been telling me that like people that are interested in like the riso scene have started becoming interested in their work, which is it's good, because they're getting exposed to saints or
cool
things like that.
Yeah, I can show that some of their riso. Let's see, go back.
I think because of the Etsy tags. The riso community is kind of small.
Oh, back down here. Let's see. Oh, wait.
There's like a section at the top for like
gallery.
a riso gallery. Yeah.
So it's beautiful.
Yeah, I like, I really wanted, I told the founder, like, I kind of would be interested if they started, like, manufacturing, like, new Martyr Press 3D glasses. Because the thing about, like, risographs is that they have, like, an overlay effect that if you use 3D glasses, like, it pops.
Oh,
But I don't think they were, like, too into that.
okay. Huh.
But some people that, like, sell risographs, because the screen print imperfections on the color layers are different, they will, like, include 3D glasses with prints.
Hmm.
But I guess that's, like, a no-go for now.
Okay, so I guess that's our interview. So thank you everybody for watching, and we'll catch you all next time. And thank you to Justine.
Thank you.